You're listening to the Intercoastal Podcast, part of the Destination Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Intercoastal Podcast, where we share the stories, heritage, and hidden gems that make the Lowcountry unforgettable. This is a place to find your Intercoastal. I'm Daquan Mickens, and today we're diving deep into the history with someone who knows it better than anyone, Dr. Larry Rowland. We'll explore Beaufort's role in the years leading up to the American Revolution, the people who shaped it, and how those moments still echo in the community today. Dr. Rowland, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Daquan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and we've talked before. We've had you on the episode before, and it's done great work with letting people know the history of Beaufort. And like they say, history has a sense to repeat itself. So it's great for not only the history lovers, but the people who are looking to know more history for the future. Just to begin, can you tell us what first drew you to Beaufort's revolutionary history?
Very interesting, Daquan. It was the first thing that I studied when I went back to graduate school. I went to back to graduate school on the GI Bill. I was in the Navy for 5 years. And then when I went back, there was a seminar paper that I was supposed to do for a class. And among the subjects that you could choose from was the American Revolution in the southern parishes. So the area between Charleston and Savannah, which were the southern parishes of South Carolina, was a bit of a mystery to historians. And there was a lot of back and forth and change here. And so my professor, Robert Weir, he wanted me to do a seminar paper to sort some of that out. And that's where I started. It was the first real assignment that I had was the American Revolution in the Beaufort District.
Yeah. And where did you go to school?
University of South Carolina.
Okay.
I got my master's degree and PhD at the University of South Carolina.
Okay. And are you from South Carolina, like South Carolina area, or?
Daquan, I'm a native of Beaufort.
Yeah,
I moved to Beaufort in 1952, so you can imagine what this town was like when I grew up here as a child, a teenager in the 50s, and it was idyllic.
Yes.
You know it now.
Yes.
It was, I can't say it was better, but for a kid, it was just a playground.
I was going to say, and to be able to share the history of the place where you grew up, there was history prior to you coming here and, growing up here. So that combination of seeing Beaufort beginning to now, it's pretty amazing. And then moving forward to carry that same history, you're passing that history along to younger people and to new listeners and people who are looking to move to Beaufort. You're giving that same experience.
Thank you, Daquan. That's exactly the intent, and I hope it succeeds.
Yes. So for listeners who might not know, what made Beaufort such a significant place in the years before the Revolution?
Beaufort was, throughout the colonial period, a frontier. That frontier, it was the southern frontier of English North America in the early 18th century. Of course, the settlement of Georgia made Georgia the frontier, but this was still the borderline between Spanish Florida and English Carolina and Georgia. And that led to many conflicts, Native American conflicts. The Yamasee War was a terribly deadly war. 1715 to 1726. And then there were wars between the British Empire and the Spanish Empire in the middle of the century that always led to campaigns against Charleston and Beaufort from Florida and against St. Augustine from Georgia and South Carolina. And the Spanish Wars, we used to call them, they're back and forth for 100 years. So that this area was a battleground between in the era of the colonial wars, and there were many people who settled here, who prospered here, who left progeny who prospered here, who were frontier warriors. I mean, the town of Beaufort was founded by Tuscarora Jack Barnwell. I mean, he was one of the greatest Indian fighters in colonial America. He died in 1724, but he founded this town in 1711 during that turbulent period.
Yeah. So if I were to ask, what significance did Beaufort play in when you look at Charleston or you look at St. Augustine for those colonial wars? How important was Beaufort in that aspect?
Well, it's very interesting. Beaufort is geographically very significant in those wars because at least half of the wars between the colonial wars between Spanish Florida and English Carolina and Georgia were fought at sea.
Yep.
And the deepest natural harbor between New York and Key West is Port Royal Sound in the Beaufort District. It divides the Beaufort District. It's 30 feet of water over the bar, 70 feet of water behind the islands. It's an admiral's dream. So Spanish admirals who discovered it originally in 1514, the Spanish sailors always had a plan to invade South Carolina by sending the fleet into Port Royal Sound. And of course, that was a threat to the Sea Islands and a threat to the nascent town of Beaufort throughout the colonial period. So the first settlers here, the first English settlers here, they weren't the first. The Spaniards had a city on Paris Island prior to that they abandoned. And the French had a expedition on Paris Island, the first Protestant colony in the New World in 1562. So the English weren't really the first here, but they came to stay. And those who stayed and developed farms and plantations and businesses, they were always under threat of Spanish invasion and under threat of Indian wars to begin with and Spanish wars throughout the 18th century. And that really didn't end until 1763. This place was settled. They were going to settle the colony of South Carolina in 1670, but they moved to Charleston to stay away from the Spaniards.
Yeah.
They came here first because the harbor invited them in. And the Native Americans that they met here on the islands spoke Spanish. So that tells you a tale.
Yes.
And so the first Englishmen in 1670 were convinced and determined that they'd move to the second best harbor in South Carolina, which is Charleston Harbor. But they moved up there, and Charleston became the first English settlement. And then the Englishmen moved back. But once again, in the movement back south from Charleston, they had to contend with the Native American tribes, some of whom were hostile, and with the Spanish Empire in Florida, which was always hostile for 100 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was life like? We talked about the war part, but what was life like in the mid to late 1700s, both for the wealthy planters and the ordinary townspeople?
Great question, because there were two big turning points in that period in the middle of the 18th century that basically were not only political and military turning points, but they were also economic turning points. So the largest export of South Carolina and what made South Carolina one of the richest English provinces in America in the 18th century was rice. And rice was grown on the Combahee River and on the Santee River, and the great plantations were developed. And that was also the motivation. The rice plantations and the rice industry were the motivations for the importation of hundreds of thousands of African slaves. In fact, the rice industry was known in West Africa and brought here. It was a lot of African technology and African seed that started that industry. The Sea Islands, where we are, where Beaufort is different.
Yeah.
You can't grow rice here because all the water that we see here is salt.
Yeah.
So you had to do something else. And in the middle of the 18th century, they found something else to do, and it was called indigo. Now, indigo is a blue vegetable dye grown from a plant that grows all over the place. Wild. It's not hard to grow indigo. It's hard to process it. The idea was to take this blue indigo plant and turn it into a powder dye that could be used to the textile industry in England to dye clothes blue.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to devise a system, and they did. And all the plantations that grew indigo were like little factories, where they had a series of vats that would move the indigo from trash plants to blue water to blue mud in steps. It was the blue mud that was valuable.
Yeah.
And you would dry the blue mud a lot of different ways, put it in casks, and send it to England. And when they wanted to have blue dye cloth, which they were producing in large amounts in the 18th century, they just fill up a bucket of water, take a cask of indigo grown in the islands of South Carolina, toss it in there, and they had their blue fabric dye.
Yeah.
And it was the only known in the world at that time. So it was highly prized, and it became the second most valuable export of South Carolina, and it could only be grown on the Sea Islands. And that economic transformation, which occurred in the 1740s, made these original planters in India. Tuscarora Jack Barnwell, who died in 1724, was the great Indian fighter. His son, Colonel Nathaniel Barnwell, became the largest indigo planter in South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
So this is an example of the economic transformation that occurred. And from the 1740s and the 50s, indigo was growing. And people on these sea islands were getting rich. And the town of Beaufort was beginning to build big houses on the bluff, and take on the character that it has today. Now, the other great turning point was political or military. There have been several wars. The last war between the Spanish Empire and the British Empire was the War of Spanish Succession, known in America as the French and Indian War. At the conclusion of that war, at the Treaty of Paris, the great prize was French Canada, which became English Canada at that time in 1763. But on this coast, there was something more important that happened. Florida was given up by the Spaniards to the English. And from 1763 until the end of the American Revolution, Florida was an English colony, not a Spanish colony. That ended the Spanish Wars. That ended what was left of the Indian Wars. That brought stability and peace to the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia. And so with the Indigo Revolution and the peace of 1763, this town went through a boom, almost the likes of which it has not seen since. The population of this district increased 4 times in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
We worry about the population growth today with Hilton Head and Bluffton, all the tourism that you, Daquan, are bringing to Beaufort. Which is what you're supposed to do, of course.
You want people to know
but,
there.
The growth was percentage-wise and influence-wise much less than the 10 years before the American Revolution.
Yeah.
So at that period of time, you had a whole younger generation of Beaufortonians who were getting rich on indigo and whose parents had fought in the Spanish Wars. And they were, in Charleston at least, they were getting to feel quite independently wealthy. There are stories of Englishmen who went, of South Carolinians who went to England in those years to get educated. One of the most famous was Thomas Hayward Jr., who was from Beaufort and Jasper County. His father may have been the richest man in America. He was a rice planter. He had 1,200 African slaves, and it's hard to say, but that was property in those days. And he may have, as a county, he owned 15,000 of acres of property, and a lot of it in rice fields. So he may well have been the richest man in America. Now, even the Revolution, 9 of the 10 richest men in America lived in Charleston, South Carolina. And they were rice planters, and some of them indigo planters. But they were all slave owners, And so this the whole colony and state began to develop a sort of historic reputation in those years. And the growth in this district was greater than any place in the state, even faster than Georgetown and Charleston. So it was a boom town, boom time. And the big houses on the bay that now characterize the town, and some of the houses on the point were built at that time with that wealth that just preceded the American Revolution. So this was a very prosperous moment in the 500-year history of Beaufort.
Yeah, it helped bring in that forefront of how Beaufort, kind of got established today. Like you said, the buildings downtown and the mansions and the big houses and even the arsenal, like it kind of that boom started that role of, okay, let's start implementing some things into Beaufort.
Yes.
Yes, so I agree. One other question is the Battle of the Port Royal Sound Island in 1779 is often mentioned in local history. Can you walk us through what happened and why it mattered?
On the eve of the Revolution, there was an event that occurred where we are sitting in the arsenal that had a lot to do with the separation of the colonies from Great Britain.
Yes.
It was called the Beaufort Assembly of 1772. And it's mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. It was that important. What happened was that the royal governor of South Carolina, Lord Charles Granville Montague, he had not been able to get a budget out of the South Carolina legislature, which was called the Commons House of Assembly. And way back to the Magna Carta under English common law, you couldn't get a government budget unless the people agreed to it, and the people's representatives. This is a fundamental part of our Constitution. And so the one thing that the people of South Carolina could do to try and express their displeasure with the king was cut off the money.
Yeah.
So they did in 1767. So Governor Montague, he never had a budget. In fact, he'd had to live in the barracks in Fort Johnson and Charleston and row across the harbor to go to work.
Oh, wow.
And this is Lord Charles Granville Montague. He wasn't expecting to do that, So every year he'd go to the Commons House of Assembly and ask for more money, and every year the American delegates, the South Carolina delegates said, no, you're not getting any money from us. He shut down the government. Now, we don't worry about shut down governments anymore, do we? This never happens. And when it happens, it's always the money.
Yeah.
Yes. So this exact thing happened in 1767 to 72.
Crazy.
So Lord Charles Granville Montague, he wanted to break the impasse. And some, quote, gentleman from Beaufort who we cannot name, I can guess, but we don't know, had told the governor that if he moved the capital to Beaufort, they would build him a governor's mansion here, and everything would be fine. They had a bigger port and harbor. They had a naval station that was established before that time.
Oh, wow.
And so the governor had the constitutional right to call the assembly to meet at any place he wished. The king did this in England.
Yeah.
When there was a fire or a plague in London, they moved to Oxford. Well, Governor Montague decided to move the legislature to Beaufort in October 1772. He was hoping that the gentlemen of Beaufort who would be on his side would show up, and the gentlemen of Charleston, who were his enemies, would not. Well, he was wrong. Yeah. All the Charleston delegates came down here. In fact, in October of 1772, in the colonial courthouse that was on the site that we are sitting on today, where this interview is being done, they met in October 1772. There were 4 signers of the Declaration of Independence in attendance at the Beaufort Assembly. So they met. The king asked for money. All the Charleston delegates said, "You're not getting any money from us." And they shut down the assembly. It only lasted a week. And they went back to Charleston. But when the delegates from South Carolina went to to help write the Declaration of Independence, they listed among the grievances of the king, number 4, that he, meaning the governor, has moved the place of assembly to places that are distant from the public record and difficult for to assemble at, for the sole purpose of fatiguing us into compliance with his measures. It's written almost like that in the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
It only applies to the Beaufort Assembly. And so before the war, this place, this old town, had a significant part in the causes of the American Revolution. Now, during the war, and a lot of people in Beaufort were not in favor of independence.
Yeah.
They'd been fighting for the older generation had fought the Spaniards, fought the pirates, fought the Indians. They were the king's men.
Yeah.
Their sons, on the other hand, wanted to be independent. One of those was Thomas Hayward Jr., who signed the Declaration of Independence. His father had been a colonel in the colonial wars. But his father and Tuscarora Jack's eldest son, these guys, they died in the early years of the Revolutionary War. So they weren't there. The younger generation took over, and the younger generation were revolutionaries.
Yeah.
Patriots. So during the war, the British realized that Port Royal Sound was vulnerable and useful to the British Navy.
Yeah.
And in 1779, they decided they would send an expedition up. They had already captured Savannah, partly from Florida.
Yeah.
English troops coming up from Florida. And so they sent an expedition up from Savannah with British light infantry, a regiment of British light infantry, and a British man-of-war, 18-gun ship, which had been dismasted and was rowed through the Sea Islands, kind of like a battery, artillery battery. So this expedition left Savannah in January 1779. They came through Skull Creek behind Hilton Head. They came out into Port Royal Sound. They burned many of the plantations on Hilton Head on their way. They caused a lot of mayhem. They came up the Broad River, and they landed at Laurel Bay, which is the Marine Corps Air Station housing section today.
Okay.
And so they were on Port Royal Island. Well, the Port Royal militia and many of the Charleston militia were in Sheldon on the mainland. They came across to Port Royal Island. The British had gone to Beaufort, found nobody there, and backed up. And in the middle of Port Royal Island, a place called the Halfway House, right at the end of the runways of the Marine Corps Air Station, a significant little battle was fought between a few Continental troops and a lot of American militia and a regiment of British regular infantry. And the Americans remarkably won the battle. We had bigger guns. The Charleston artillery came down with 2 6-pounders, and they clobbered the English line.
Yeah.
The remnants of Fort Littleton near Beaufort came with a small cannon, like a swivel gun on wheels, a 2-pounder, and it was a rapid-fire gun at the time in the 18th century. And from the flank, they pounded the British line.
Yeah.
So the American artillery defeated the British, and they had to evacuate to their ships and go back to Savannah. It didn't last too long because pretty soon the whole British Army marched from Savannah to Charleston, and Beaufort and the Sea Islands were cut off, basically. But the Battle of Beaufort was a significant little battle. It was the first time that American Continental forces in South Carolina fought British regulars, and we beat them. And 2 signers of the Declaration of Independence were there, Thomas Lynch and Thomas Hayward. And so there were some significant personages.
Yeah.
In addition to that, the hero of the battle was the drummer, who was a black slave, and he signaled the cannons all the way through. And the drummers in a battle were always targets for sharpshooters.
Yeah.
Well, this young man his first battle was at Port Royal Island, but he went to every major battle as a drummer for the American artillery, all the way to Yorktown. And he was a hero, black hero of American troops. And so when he got to Georgetown, he was given his freedom. And he came back to South Carolina, was later given land in Alabama. And he lived to be 102 years old and had a whole lot of Alabama descendants.
Yeah.
Great guy, but it's a good story. And there was a Jewish company of Jewish merchants from Charleston at the Battle of Port Royal Island that fought, called the Lushington Company. Their captain was a Quaker.
Okay.
And so there were a lot of interesting things that happened at the Battle of Port Royal Island, but it was strategically insignificant because though we won it, we had to back up to Charleston. And Charleston, they besieged Charleston twice, once in 1779 when they failed, once again in 1780 when they succeeded. And so all of this became British occupied territory after 1780.
So it helped bridge the Charleston-Beaufort kind of gap, helping with Charleston helping out during that war.
That
battle.
It depends on how you look at it. I'm a Beaufort historian.
Yes.
And the way I look at it is that Charleston did everything they could to help themselves.
Yes.
Okay. And now, if my friends in Charleston hear this, I'm going to catch a little, But if my daughter and her family in Charleston hear this, I'm going to catch them. But it's basically true. Beaufort had assets that Charleston doesn't have. The harbor. And Charleston's always worked in their own interest. And there are a lot of stories through history about that. One of the themes of Beaufort's history is that it is a forgotten place between Charleston to the north and Savannah to the south. But it's a beautiful little place because of it.
Yeah.
And it prospered through its history most of the time.
I agree. I know we talked about Thomas Hayward Jr. and, his impact in the battle. Was there a long-lasting impact felt from him or anyone else?
Oh, yes. Because the Haywards were a very rich and powerful family right to the Civil War. In fact, Thomas Hayward's youngest brother, this goes a long way. I mean, the lineage is very interesting. It's a very big family. But Thomas Hayward Jr.'s youngest brother was a man named Nathaniel Hayward who lived to 1851. Long after the Revolution. He was a child at the time of the Revolution. But at his death in 1851, he might have been the richest man in America. A lot of very distinguished economic historians believe he was the largest slaveholder in the American South.
Yeah.
And he lived on the Combahee River. And he built the largest house in Beaufort.
Oh, wow.
His mansion was in Beaufort, the Hayward Mansion. And it was, twice the size of the mansions that are there today. It no longer exists.
Yeah.
Because at the time of the Civil War, it was turned into a hotel. The Sea Island Hotel, it was known for many years. And it was finally taken down. And it lasted 100 years. It was built in the 1840s and 50s. And it was taken down in the 1950s and 60s.
Okay.
And but it was, you see it in all the historic pictures of Beaufort. So the Haywards had a lasting influence economically and politically on this district. And the descendants of John Barnwell, Tuscarora Jack Barnwell, had a huge influence on this region. They were congressmen. Robert W. Barnwell was a United States senator. Robert W. Barnwell was the president of the University of South Carolina College, now the University of South Carolina.
Okay.
and the other, there are many families, but the Elliott family, who were early settlers with both the Barnwells and the Haywards. One Elliott was the valedictorian of the Yale class, 1791, and he was the inspiration behind the founding of the Beaufort College in 1795, which is now the University of South Carolina, Beaufort. So that is a very, very old tradition of higher education that persists and survives and thrives in Beaufort under the University of South Carolina system. So there were lots of lingering effects of the American Revolution. And all those families throughout the antebellum period look back on their revolutionary ancestors as heroes and models.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. I know. So I know we talked about the Loyalists and the Patriots and kind of the revolution happening. And with the younger generation, was there a reason for like the younger family members not following in the footsteps of their parents and wanting that freedom?
Oh, yes, there was. One thing, they were prospering, so they felt like they could survive without the mother country.
Okay.
And of course, they're all the standard objections. In other words, England was trying to tax America without their permission.
Yes.
No taxation without representation. Incidentally, in the Declaration of Independence grievances, that's number 17.
Yeah.
The Beaufort Assembly is number 4.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know that has any meaning to the but the famous objection is no taxation without representation. And that was true in the Tea Parties in Boston and Charleston. That was true in every other, the Stamp Act.
Yeah.
And all of these brought demonstrations. And all of these made more and more patriots for the American independence, you know.
Okay.
But what was our original question, Daquan?
The original question was just the tension between Loyalists and Patriots.
Yeah. And not everybody in this district was a strong patriot. In fact, because of the history of the colonial period and the dependency on the crown and its military support, there were probably as many, if not more, loyalists on the Sea Islands as there were patriots. And what really happened during the war is, as it was occupied by the British and then reoccupied by the Americans back and forth, people would try and make do with whichever side was there, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they just wanted to survive and hold their property together, and so they would cooperate. A couple of them went too far, and I'll tell you the story of Major Andrew DeVoe because it ought to be a Hollywood movie. It's so good. Major Andrew DeVoe was one of the old families here. They were rice planters and indigo planters, and they were Huguenots. DeVoe is, of course, a big French name.
Yes.
And Andrew DeVoe the Fourth was the most famous Tory from this district. Probably, maybe the most effective Tory in the entire state of South Carolina, sort of the Francis Marion of the Tories, you know. And, but his grandfather had been the man who devised the system of processing indigo and taught it to the Sea Island planters. So he had come up from Haiti, from San Domingue.
Yeah.
And so their lineage and their wealth was unquestioned. But when the war started, Andrew DeVoe's father did not like the Patriots. So Andrew DeVoe was a teenager. He was 15 years old when the war started. You know?
Oh, wow.
Well, he got a little gang of guys together, and he started raising hell with the Patriots.
Yeah.
And so there was a divided community here, and he never looked back, nor did his father. They were always loyal to the crown. It is thought that Andrew DeVoe led the expedition to Port Royal Island from Savannah in 1779. Well, they landed on the property next door, so it's a good chance he did, you know, was a guide. In any case, when the war devolved into a an unconventional war of occupation and guerrilla fighters like Francis Marion. Andrew Devoe formed a band that were loyalist guerrillas. And they served the British, advancing with the British forces. It was Andrew Devoe and his gang that burned Sheldon Church when the British invaded in 1779. It was Andrew Devoe who retreated with the British and to Savannah and helped defend Savannah against the French attack in 1770.
Yeah.
8 and 1779, 80. And of course, when the British took Charleston, Andrew Devoe was one of the most useful local citizens because he was a boatman. He'd grown up on the Sea Islands. He knew all about how to sail boats and rowboats. And he went up and down the Sea Islands taking provisions from the rice plantations and the Sea Islands to feed the English troops that were almost imprisoned in Charleston while the American army surrounded it at the end of the war. And during that time, he came back with a fleet of 3 galleys and seized the town of Beaufort again, and that kept it for several weeks, took whatever he wanted off of it, including a lot of slaves that were his property and probably other people's property. And when the war ended, the British troops didn't evacuate Charleston until December 1781. And the war ended some months later. A lot of slaves went with the British. Some were freed.
Yeah.
Some went to Canada. As many as 20,000 South Carolina slaves went to Canada, were freed in Nova Scotia, and eventually shipped to Africa to form the Republic of Liberia. Those were South Carolinians that formed the Republic of Liberia. And the Liberia, I've talked to Liberians. They know it.
Yeah.
Their ancestry were South Carolinians.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I mean, there should be a very close union there between our two countries. Probably is. In any case, Andrew Devoe didn't take that route. He went to the Bahamas because the Bahama Islands, part of Florida, were still British territory even after the treaty was signed. The Treaty of Paris in 1783 flipped Florida back to the Spaniards. So all the English in St. Augustine, where the loyalists from South Carolina and Georgia had fled, and many of their slaves, literally thousands of the slaves from South Carolina and Georgia, went with their loyalist owners to St. Augustine. They had no place to go except the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So that Andrew Devoe was the man who seized the Bahama Islands from the British forces, from actually Spanish forces at the end of the war, in a kind of a ruse. But he was a swashbuckler and very enterprising guy. And down in Nassau today, there's a street at the east side of Nassau called Devoe Street, after the guy that dislodged the Spanish troops. In any case, when the Treaty of Paris was signed, the Bahamas remained a British colony. So loyalists from South Carolina and Georgia were given grants on those islands. They took their slaves with them. And in the 1780s, they were trying to find out something they could grow that would be useful. And they planted a little black seed from the island of Anguilla that we today call Sea Island cotton. And that's where the Cotton Revolution after the war began in the Bahamas, among the loyalists, led there by Andrew Devoe of Beaufort, South Carolina.
I was going to say, who knew like that?
Yeah.
It's
a very important connection. It's a small thread, but it's a connection that transformed the economy of the United States eventually, ultimately.
Yeah.
That's
so interesting.
That's where the cotton started. And Andrew Devoe was one of the first cotton planters there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You never would know that this, like you said, the small thread of one event that slowly pulled out all the way to some like a larger event happening in another country, or it's just amazing that how it travels.
From tiny acorns, mighty oak trees grow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Daquan. That's great.
So if someone wanted to visit Beaufort today and trace its revolutionary history, what sites and landmarks would you recommend they start to see first?
Well, the best artifact of Beaufort's history is the town itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go to the history, come to where we're sitting right now, Daquan. Come see the arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
Sit in the courtyard.
Yeah.
The arsenal was built after the war, but it's the site of the courthouse
Mm-hmm.
where that event in the Declaration of Independence occurred.
Yes.
And it was the center of town. And of course, you have to walk Bay Street. You have to realize that in the waterfront park, there was once a fort around which the town grew.
Yeah.
And you look down the river from the park and you can see Paris Island, where the first Protestant colony in the New World was, and the first European capital in North America was, because the first capital of Florida was St. Helena on Paris Island. So you walk around the town and you see the vestiges of the cotton era,
Yeah.
a little bit of the indigo. But you look down the river and you can see not only where the Spanish and French founded America, but you can also see on the right where during the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation was read on the 1st of January, 1863, to 10,000 Sea Island slaves, probably the largest group of people in America that were actually freed by the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
And if you stand in the waterfront park, you could see it from there, So the town it looks like it, but it exudes the history. And if you know a bit about it, you have an imagination, you can see it all around you.
Yeah. And there's, like it said, there's many places where you can experience and take in the history and what happened here in the past.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an American treasure. This town is an American treasure.
It is. As we approach the 250th anniversary of American independence, what lessons from Beaufort's history do you think are most relevant for us now?
Well, if I had to pick anything, this town was very divided by the American Revolution, as I described. I mean, very important contributed people on both sides of that.
Yes.
But after the war, they cooperated,
Yeah.
In other words, if you have a big battle, get over it,
Yes.
and get on with it. Now, in this town, they had a huge advantage in getting on with it. Money always helps, Well, the first commercial crop of Sea Island cotton that came from the Bahamas up here was grown on Hilton Head Island in 1790, shortly after the American Revolution. So all of a sudden, there was a huge economic boom. And if you have economic prosperity, it's easy to be friends with everybody.
Yes.
To be generous and friendly with everybody. In fact, it's profitable to be generous and friendly with everybody.
Yes.
So that would be the lesson. And that's what happened in this town after the American Revolution. Loyalist sentiments were kind of forgotten. Patriot sentiments were acknowledged,
Yeah.
So it's a good question and a good story.
Yeah. It's always great to take the past and take those lessons in history and apply them to today and the future moving forward. Thank you so much, Dr. Rowland, for guiding us through Beaufort's rich and fascinating revolutionary history. These stories help us see the present through the lens of the past. Anything else you would like the listeners to know, or where they can find you, or anything about the Beaufort 250 that they should know?
The Beaufort 250, I'm sitting next to one of the commissioners here.
Yes.
Is doing a whole lot of things. So I can't, frankly, keep up with him, even though I'm part of some of them. They're doing a whole lot of things. So just try and stay alert to this. And I'd like to thank you, Daquan, for a great interview. This is not the first time we've had this conversation, but you do a great job with this, and I thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. And like we said, we want to kind of give this to not only future listeners, but people visiting Beaufort, locals, and just kind of give them the history of Beaufort and the importance of Beaufort in American history. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Intercoastal Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media at visit_BeaufortSC on Instagram or at BeaufortSC on Facebook. Like, subscribe, and leave a review. And share this episode with anyone who loves history, culture, and the Lowcountry. Until next time.
This has been another episode of the Intercoastal Podcast, hosted by Daquan Mickens and the team at Visit Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands. Produced by Brand Revolt.